Saving Private Ryan might be the greatest war movie ever made, and is undoubtedly one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever created. As a game master, you should be looking for inspiration for your role-playing games in other media, even if that media isn't fantasy. It's easy to lift individual scenes and characters from a work and adapt it into your own narrative, whether you are a player or a dungeon master. But can you run an entire D&D adventure using Saving Private Ryan as the structure? Can we use its plot and themes together with our own setting and characters to make a unique and compelling role-playing experience? I believe we can, and I'm going to tell you how. Typically, when I sit down to make a serious video, I include a lot of introductory language in case a viewer hasn't played D&D or doesn't know the piece of media I'm talking about. In this case, we're throwing off the training wheels. I'm going to assume that you're a DM or a player considering being a DM, and I'm going to assume you've seen Saving Private Ryan. If you are a seasoned game master who runs other TTRPGs, this one is also for you. I play other RPGs, but this video would get complicated if I included a lot of other possibilities, so I'm sticking to D&D and trusting your brilliant indie RPG mind to translate the details into your favorite game. But first, one important note. I don't want to spend so long asking if we could do something before spending a minute asking first if we should. Plenty of tables will turn down playing out certain scenarios to avoid discomfort and disrespect. This can include, but is not limited to, avoiding instances of sexual assault, shying away from typical fantasy racism allegories, or not lingering on overly gory details or scenes of torture. I have played at tables that allowed all of these things. I have played at tables that have allowed none of them. There is no right answer here other than the one you and your players agree to. I'm a big fan of hosting a Session Zero and having this conversation with your players. So what does this have to do with Saving Private Ryan? We are examining a work of historical fiction. Private Ryan is not a real person. There was never a mission to go save him. But the invasion of Normandy during World War II was absolutely real, and real men sacrificed themselves to make the world a better place. For some, that element of reality is going to be too close to the story to insert yourself into. For others, it could provide an opportunity to elevate your role-playing with conscious consideration of the real struggles experienced by real soldiers. I am not going to tell you where on the spectrum you should fall. That is for you and your players to decide. I will only ask that you remain respectful and not spring this story on anyone who isn't prepared for it. If you want more information on the history behind Saving Private Ryan, I encourage you to check out History Buff's video on the topic. With that out of the way, let's get to this little case study. How can we translate the story of Saving Private Ryan to our tabletop role-playing game? The setting of the film is June 6, 1944, D-Day. American troops seek to liberate German-occupied France. There are plenty of other details to the invasion and the backdrop of the largest war in history going on in the background, but for our purposes, we are stripping down the story to its essentials to get at the core of our adventure. Our setting can be anywhere you can imagine. It is possible to play it straight as a World War II role-playing game. Plenty of people have homebrewed modern firearms into D&D. You could go that route, but I would not personally advise it. D&D works best when we work within the realm of heroic fantasy, or just one step removed into something like dark fantasy or space fantasy. Go with a setting you are personally drawn to or want to experience more of. I myself was initially drawn to playing up a fantasy Greek war in Theros, or using the heightened tech of Eberron, but to push my own boundaries, I think I would go with an invasion on the Astral Sea. An evil faction of Githyanki have taken over a region that is home to astral elves, and we are striking with an allied force to take back the region and eventually topple this Githyanki regime. We will not be using any firearms, instead swapping out guns for classic bows and swords. For our ordnance and artillery, we will use single-use magic items and siege engines, and when it's time for a tank to show up, we will use a red dragon favored by the Githyanki. This is the most important piece of our puzzle. Setting and rules can make a suitable sandbox, but we want a well-structured adventure. And of course, we don't want a railroad. Like any good dungeon master running a pre-written adventure, we will be prepared for things to veer off course due to player decisions. That's why I'm using the word plot here and not story. The story will develop as a result of the shared storytelling experience and the roll of the dice. As Dungeon Master, we do have control over presenting the plot, the encounters and connecting moments that will move things along. We will also need elements of all three pillars of play: exploration, social roleplay, and of course, combat. The beach landing is our essential tone setter. To establish a sense of danger and to avoid plot armor, I would personally use a Dungeon Crawl Classic style funnel. In a funnel, each player is given a handful of randomly generated level 0 characters, only one of whom will make it through the first session to build as a fully realized character with levels and a class. 5th edition D&D doesn't have a system for level 0 characters, but it does have lots of NPC and monster stat blocks. For my game, I would hand everyone a few cards with hobgoblin stats and ask them to assign or randomly roll a different species for our soldiers. The entire beach sequence is going to take a full session, broken up into multiple consecutive combat encounters. For the landing itself, we're going to include some harsh environments and athletics checks, while raining down arrows and shatter spells on our helpless level 0 hobgoblins. Our soldiers progress up the beach and find cover behind a sandbar. They need to breach the enemy walls to advance through. For our Bangalores, I am going to hand one player at random a special scroll of delayed blast fireball and a 10-foot pole. During a big battle sequence, it is important to not get distracted by the hundreds or thousands of combatants clashing in the background. D&D is not a mass combat game like Warhammer. We are focused on a small party of characters, and for a battle scene, we need to see how their small actions prove pivotal in the overall encounter. Saving Private Ryan provides a good model for this by showing how Miller's squad advances on the German bunker. By using cover, careful timing, and maybe a critical hit from our sniper, our players will make it past the third encounter. Now it's time to clear out the trenches. Prolonged fights are not important, especially after all that our players have been through up to this point. Our Githyanki adversaries don't need full HP, and for most encounters, I would actually use the minion rules from 4th edition. Enemies will have 1 HP and give limited XP since they go down in one successful attack, but they can still hit just as hard. Let your players have a victory lap, slaying some evil minions, and wrap up the first session by starting up some builds for their surviving characters. We make a short time skip to the mission briefing at the start of Session 2. Our characters have had some other encounters since taking the beach, so I'm actually going to ask everyone to do some homework and come in tonight with level 3 characters. The commanding officer will assign our quest: go behind enemy lines, track down one special kobold whose other kobold siblings have perished, and bring him home so that Mama Kobold won't be the saddest kobold mama ever. We'll take a quick second to recruit the squad. Maybe someone missed the initial funnel session, or they lost all their level 0 characters and had to make someone completely new who didn't charge the beach like we did. That would be our Upham. We'll get to characters later in the video. Then our squad goes marching. We're going to employ a simple hex crawl to move across our hostile landscape. You could spend a lot of time here if you really want to draw out the campaign or give out more experience, but I'll be making this quick so we'll only jump around a couple hexes here and there. Most important to this scene is to allow for some party banter about your current situation. If you're playing with a newer group, it's going to be helpful to insert your own NPC into the squad to prompt this kind of talk between your players. But if you're playing with an experienced and comfortable group, your input won't be necessary and they'll start chatting on their own. This is their chance to describe their characters and establish their attitude about this frankly absurd mission. Thankfully, questionable quests are a D&D staple. We make it to our first ruined village, where an astral elf family wants someone to take their astral elf child away from this war. This provides a quandary for our characters to discuss. The quandary will be cut short by a boss monster in the form of the sniper in the tower. Any powerful ranged enemy will do, but I'm going with the Orthon. We go back to our hex crawl and wander into another village. Do your best Paul Giamatti impression for this NPC, who will trip a trap and reveal an entire platoon of enemies ready to cut down your party. This could prove too dangerous, so you can always insert some friendly NPCs to remove the threat. Put a pin in that, we'll get back to it. Our party thinks they found Private Kobold, but it's just Nathan Fillion. We take a long rest at a chapel and reflect on the events so far. This is a good enough place to end our second session. Our next step on the Hex Crawl brings us to a friendly NPC telling us about a specially enchanted airship that went foobar. Decent world building and notes on our themes, and we are moving on. We introduce a quick little puzzle for our party to fail at. With no sign of Private Kobold, we might insert a random NPC to point our party towards the correct hex. The party comes across a Githyanki Ballista tower. Taking it out is dangerous and inessential to the quest, but leaving it active places our allies in danger. This is a good engagement quandary for your players to decide whether to roll initiative or just walk around. If they do roll initiative, they will need to use tactics and cover to advance on the ballista and take it out. No frills here, just a good, quick combat with a clear goal and palpable stakes. If your characters aren't total murder hobos, there might still be one Githyanki alive. We'll make Steamboat Willie a Gish just for some added tension. We have another quandary about what to do with this prisoner. Once again, we hex crawl, and this time we come across an enemy that will outmatch our party. I really like the Ogre Howdah, but to make it more threatening, we'll go with a Frost Giant Everlasting one, carrying a clutch of Githyanki. Once again, we have some friendly NPCs show up to save the party. Put a pin in it. Turns out that the friendly NPCs include none other than Private Kobold himself. The adventuring day continues from here, but that's where we're going to leave Session 3, on a cliffhanger and on a level up. Everyone can pick up some extra HP and a feat before we reconvene next week for the finale. We are back for our fourth and final session. We're done with the Hex Crawl, we've found Private Kobold, and it's time for our climax. We are, however, presented with another quandary. Private Kobold is sad that he lost his Kobold siblings, but he is lawful good and refuses to abandon his newfound band of brothers. Powerful moment, everyone claps, but it puts our party in a difficult situation. They could turn around and leave, but this is D&D and our players should have shown up for the adventure. So we're going to gear up for one last big fight and ensure that Private Kobold makes it through. So we have some downtime in Ramel, which gives us a classic subversion of the D&D formula. The DM will be the one swarming the dungeon with enemies, so it is up to the players to use their skills and resources to set up the traps and use the environment to their advantage. Have some fun here, but don't waste too much time counting socks. We have a campaign to finish. And what a finish we will have. Unlike the beach landing with multiple encounters, for the Ramel sequence, we will keep things moving through the entire dungeon as we send out lots of Githyanki minions, a few knight mini-bosses, and of course an adult red dragon. No one is safe, the battle is dire, and we will try our best as the DM to push our players back to the Alamo with no spell slots and low HP. Then the airships arrive to take out the red dragon, put a pin in it, and the battle is won. If everything went according to plan, the party has saved Private Kobold. We made it! Just one more note before we move on from our plot. You'll notice that I cut out a few key scenes, namely, the prologue and epilogue at Arlington, the cutaway to Mama Ryan, and the brass coming to the conclusion to send out the orders that will determine our party's fate. It is entirely possible to perform these scenes, though not in a traditional sense. You could narrate a short prologue to set the mood before each session. But for me, I would rather keep the focus on the perspective of the player characters themselves. Overall, we are presented with a pretty decent party structure. We are given 8 men on their special quest. 8 is a pretty big number of players at your D&D table, but it is doable, especially if you substitute in 1 or 2 character as DM-controlled NPCs. Since I opted for a funnel, it is entirely possible that all or none of our core characters actually show up in our adventure, but that's fine. It will be fun to see what unique soldiers your players come up with. But let's say you don't like my idea of a funnel, or you're on a time crunch and need to hand out pre-generated sheets for your party, possibly skipping the beach scene and starting on the main quest. Let's consider how each character could be reflected in our campaign. Captain Miller, portrayed by Tom Hanks, is our focal character, which provides some difficulties. While it is possible to run a duet campaign where it's just the DM and one player, most D&D games focus on the party and should not have one player cast as the main hero of everyone's shared journey. You could solve this by having the DM play Miller as an NPC, but I feel like this overcorrects by giving the DM too much decision-making power in the narrative they are presenting. So if I were running a Saving Private Ryan game, I would talk among my players and see who is comfortable taking on a leader role without necessarily quarterbacking the game based on their whims. Paladin of Devotion is an obvious choice, and for all of our characters you could substitute in any playable species. For some fun, I'll roll my examples up randomly, and for Miller we get an orc. Sergeant Mike Horvath plays a role as a support for our captain, which actually adds some nice balance to the leader player's role. Battlemaster Fighter seems appropriate, I rolled a human. Upham is another tricky character, because he has no combat experience unlike the rest of our crew. I considered using the sidekick rules in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything to establish Upham's role with the party, but his usefulness as a translator is far too interesting to pass up a player taking on that role. Not all characters have to be good with combat. Upham could easily be an intelligent but uncharismatic wizard with lots of languages and skills who will struggle with our combat encounters. Upham got a deep gnome. Ryben has an attitude and a BAR, so I'd like to imagine him as a barbarian with a magic maul. For Ryben, I rolled a Goliath, specifically a frost giant ancestry. Jackson might actually be the most D&D character here. He's obviously our optimized longbow build, but has a surprising amount of depth with expertise in perception and the acolyte background. I actually rolled a hobgoblin, so that's neat. Wade is the party healer, so we'll go ahead and make him a cleric with the life domain. Wade rolled a Githzerai, which adds in some extra weight to fighting the Githyanki. Mellish is around and provides some good banter, but unfortunately doesn't get a lot to do until the excruciating knife fight sequence in the climax. Let's give our Mellish a leg up in that fight by making him a monk. For species, I rolled a turtle. Interesting. Caparzo gets even less to do since he's tragically killed early on, but his fate is not sealed here in our game. I don't know what class he should be, and I don't want to just put out another fighter, so let's instead take some inspiration from surviving Vin Diesel characters Dom Toretto and Riddick and make Caparzo our rogue. I rolled an Eladrin, one of my faves. We've talked about the plot and the potential party. One is set up by you as the dungeon master, the other is made up by the players who you invite to your table. But the actual story of any D&D game should be decided not by the dungeon master, but by the player's choices combined with the roll of the dice. The most obvious potential change to the plot comes with our combat encounters. Different characters may live or die either based on their tactical decision-making or how the dice land. When you run your Saving Private Ryan D&D game, it is entirely possible that Wade successfully casts Spare the Dying on Caparzo, and he survives much longer in your story. It is possible for Captain Miller to get taken out at the gun nest, leaving the party in a much more precarious position with no clear leader in the climax. It is possible for the Upham player to actually do something when Mellish is getting stabbed, drastically altering both characters' fates in the climax. Your combat encounters should not come with pre-written endings. There should be stakes and a question of who will live or die. While laying out the plot, you may have noticed I highlighted several quandaries within the script. When you watch the movie, the decisions made by the characters are set in stone. When you play D&D, these are opportunities to change the script. Your party may decide to take along the little French girl, especially if Caparzo survives. Your party may decide to kill Steamboat Willie right away, adding a dark but pragmatic note to their own journey. Your party could even decide to forcibly take Ryan with them, potentially making the climactic encounter between the party and the otherwise friendly soldiers who have found kinship with Ryan. Your D&D story needs these decision points to truly be a role-playing game and not a walking simulator. And on that note, you need to expect the unexpected. It is entirely possible for your party to abandon your plotline early on and do something drastically different. Let's say they find Nathan Fillion and decide that this Private Ryan is good enough, so they turn around right there with him over their shoulder, march him back to the officers, and try to weave a big lie that no, this is the real Ryan. This would be a complete tonal shift in what we are trying to achieve. But if that is the story that my players want to tell, I am happy to facilitate that story for them. You cannot plan for every eventuality. That's why I'm presenting this to you as an outline with gaps rather than a fully written homebrew adventure. No matter how much you choose to write as a DM, your players and the dice will always find something you didn't think of. Accept this limitation on your control, and you will be free to experience more interesting and fun adventures. Remember when I asked to put a pin in? Well, there is one aspect of Saving Private Ryan where using it as an outline for your adventure kind of falls short. That is in its use of Deus Ex Machina. On multiple occasions, the party's fate is decided not by the players or the rolls of the dice, but by the DM's friendly NPCs showing up to eliminate the danger. This may be historically accurate. There are plenty of stories of infantry troops being pinned down until air support can arrive to save the day. But in your D&D game, this comes off as a cheap move, especially if you use it multiple times. In my Saving Private Ryan D&D game, I think I would eliminate this element entirely and allow for the possibility of a total party kill should things go poorly. However, there are other, less brutal ways around this. If you have the party find some sending stones or the ability to cast Animal Messenger in the setup of Ramel, it would be possible for the Upham character or the party as a whole to enact a plan where they are the ones who call in the air support, engaging a timer to hold out until friendly NPCs arrive. This allows for a dramatic moment from the DM while still giving agency to the players. This is something that is rarely talked about in D&D, and something I've only really begun to challenge myself with discovering in my own games. Themes are not just for 8th grade book reports. They are present in any piece of art, whether the author intends them or not. Themes like found family, the value of courage, and various alignments and ideals are easy to express in many D&D games. If you're not careful, it's also easy to present themes like colonialism, genocide, and general murder hoboing into your game. I do want to be careful with this and be mindful of the 3 writers of any D&D game: the Dungeon Master, the players, and the dice. If you, as the Dungeon Master, try to push one theme through to the end of the adventure, you risk shoving aside player agency in favor of your own agenda. The players should absolutely play a role in discovering the themes they want from the overarching story. Their decisions, their banter, and their actions in combat should be the driving force of the tone and the takeaway of your D&D game. Finally, the dice have their own role to play. All of the party's best intentions can be dashed if the enemies roll a bunch of critical hits with high damage. A total party kill can often bring a sense of hopelessness and failure to the game, but it doesn't have to. Even if all of our party members died in Ramel and failed to save Private Ryan, they would still be heroes who fought against evil and made character-defining choices along the way. Winning the game isn't the objective of D&D. Having a good time with your friends and coming away with an interesting and unique experience is what matters. Saving Private Ryan introduces a few themes which it explores to various degrees. If you want an expert's dive on those themes and some of the problems they present, I recommend you watch Macabre Storytelling's video. Let's take a brief look at a few themes the film presents. What is a moral good in war? Is Saving Private Ryan worthwhile? How can the life of one man be valued over the life of another, or even the lives of several others? This conveniently plays into the idea of good alignment in D&D, with questions on sacrifice and the greater good. Should we always follow orders? The men in Miller's squad question the nature of their mission throughout the film. Decisions like the glider and sparing Steamboat Willie are cast in doubt. This plays into law versus chaos. And finally is our story pro-war or anti-war. This is more of a meta theme than a theme within the text itself. Many war films attempt to portray the horrors of war as an objective evil that should be avoided. Yet many members of the audience will see the cool fight scenes and awesome dudes and say, yeah, sign me up. Saving Private Ryan viscerally presents the horrors of war and the toll it takes on the men who give their lives and the men who survive but carry the weight of what they went through, the brothers they lost, and the pieces of themselves that were damaged along the way. But there is an undeniable spectacle to the violence portrayed. Jackson is a badass, and Miller's leadership is heroic. As you roll dice to kill Githyanki, how will you deal with this aspect of horror versus spectacle in your game? I hope that from what I've laid out here, you can see the powerful possibility of running a Saving Private Ryan adventure for your own game. It won't be a guaranteed silver bullet for a perfect experience, but I believe it could be especially helpful if you want to introduce a tabletop role-playing game to your History Channel dad, your fellow film bros, or your wargame buddies. You don't have to take my outline and suggestions as fact though. I'm passing you the torch so that you can make the story your own. Let me know if this case study approach was interesting. I'm open to feedback if I missed something you wanted covered, or if I spent too much time on something you don't care about. If enough people like this video, I could see myself analyzing more stories in the future, but only if there's some worthwhile discussion. Thanks for watching. Whether you're stealing ideas from Hollywood or trying to come up with something more original, I hope your game this week is both fun and meaningful. I hope you have a Nat 20 day. Bye-bye.